When planning for retirement, there are only three things that determine whether you will be able to retire comfortably. The one is how much you save, the second one is how long you save for, and the third one is the investment return. Now, of those three, two of them you cannot control. You cannot control the investment return, and you cannot control nowadays how long you work for. So the only thing that's in your control is how much you save. And I think few people actually realize this. Looking forward, I think that the very high investment returns we've had over the past effectively 50 years in South Africa will not be repeated. So investment returns going forward, I think, are going to be a lot lower. So you've got to rely less on good investment returns. The uncertainty as to how long you will be able to work for certainly sits there. And that means people will have to save a lot more than they do at the moment. And I think very few people actually realize that. When it comes to investment returns, what you often find is that when people do save a little bit more outside of only their pension fund, they typically tend to be very conservative and put the money in low yielding investments, or they tend to be very risky, i.e. they put their money into investments where they get offered 1 or 2% extra return on what is reasonable in the market. And very often they find they lose all their capital, and that makes it a lot worse. So people have got to be very careful when they make their investment decisions as to where they put their money, and fully understand the risk that you take, either with too low an investment return or the risk of being promised a high investment return and losing all your capital.
Great. Is property a good investment for you? A good option?
Property. Property is a good investment. I think property is not cheap at the moment. So property has done very well. If you talk about listed property, it's done very well. But again, I think over time property will do okay. Property is like equity. It performs roughly in line with nominal GDP. But property has had a good run. So you require the economy to do well for property and equity to do well from here. And that's why, with valuations no longer that cheap, you've got to rely on a good economic activity and profitability to drive investment returns. And you can't rely from here on the valuation improvements in the market, because valuations are quite stretched. Some SMEs of this world, it sits on PE ratios or whatever. You've got to rely on growth.